I'd like to introduce our speaker, speaking on gardening with native plants and resources from OregonFlora. This is Dr. Linda Hardison joining us. She's the director of the program, and she's also in botany and plant pathology department at Oregon State. And I'm going to let you take it, Linda,
Okay.
if that's okay. I'm sure you have a lot more stories to share and people want to get to the juicy bits of native plants.
Okay.
So I'm going to mute and let you go ahead and take it away.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. As Brooke said, I'm director of OregonFlora, which is a program based in the Botany and Plant Pathology Department at Oregon State University in Corvallis. And we have been a program since 1994 gathering information about the plants of the state. And this has taken shape in several different ways. Our main emphasis is gathering all the details about the vascular state and creating a flora or a reference guide. And through that, we've developed some really great web tools and information on where plants occur across the state, and importantly, how all of this plant information can be applied. And obviously, the reason you're here is because one of the great ways that detailed, in-depth information about the plants of an area can be applied is in using these for gardening and landscaping. So I'm going to talk. First, I want to share with you some of the people who have made all this possible. So our staff consists of Thea, Stephen, Katie, John, and Tanya. Our program depends quite a bit on volunteerism and student, undergraduate and graduate workers. And so we are very fortunate to have a wonderful cadre of volunteers, people of all ages and different backgrounds who are interested in all these different aspects that really make our team function and work. The names listed here under the associates and the funding are really relevant to this gardening part. Like I said, we have a lot of different aspects and perspectives that we work on. So these are just some names relevant to what has helped us advance working with growing and use of plants. I'll also just point out right now that our funding for this whole program is completely comes from grants and donations. And so we're extremely grateful for the financial support of Metro up in Portland that has been a really the driver in getting us this great garden tool that I'm going to share with you at the end, as well as the sustained support, the Soaring Environmental Fund from the Oregon Community Foundation and some other funders. So once again, what I'm going to be covering today is how you can integrate or use native plant species in your gardens or landscape. In other words, in your planted landscapes. And why use natives? I suspect that that's something that we don't need to dwell upon, since y'all obviously are interested in gardening with natives as a master gardener. So we can then look at well, how do you think about natives, and what's a good frame of reference that we can use when we talk about, well, I'm going to grow natives around my house, or I want to landscape in this apartment complex with natives. So we'll think about how we can frame our whole idea of using native plant species in these planted situations. And then I hope to share with you some things to think about that can hopefully bring success in using native species, because they really are a little bit different from your typical horticultural varieties that you can go to, a big box store or Home Depot or someplace like that, or the drugstore, and pick up a bunch of pansies. So I'm going to try and talk about some things that will give you a perspective that you can apply, and then show you through the work that OregonFlora does some resources and some information and tools that will help you hopefully put all these pieces together and really think about how you can enjoy and use native plants in your garden and your landscape. Okay, so why or what are some of the advantages for or benefits of using natives? That would be probably some things that many of you have experienced, that they're low maintenance typically. Once you get natives established, they typically take less water, less resources, fertilizers, less maintenance. So that's kind of nice that you just plant them, and like all young babies and things, you take good care of them when they're very young, and then they will sort of become self-sufficient. It's something that we all hope for with our offspring and our younger ones. Also, another thing that natives really do in gardens and landscapes is that it provides and maintains genetic diversity. When we use clones or cultivars that don't have that whole diverse genome in them, we're losing some information. And who knows when some plant, some obscure weedy looking thing or unimpressive tiny flowered little ground cover might actually have some property that one day might be useful to us as humans, or serve in some other way in our environment or in our ecosystems that is a very positive thing. So maintaining genetic diversity just in general, I think is a really valid principle that we can really honor by using native species. Another thing that native species do very well is that they provide ecosystem services. And that's the situations and the activities and interactions of natural systems, animals, plants, the abiotic environment that help us as humans. An important part of that is also a sense of place. When we grow and propagate the plants that were here in the first place, we really get a sense of where we are on the planet. And it makes, I think it really speaks to our hearts, and I think it's a valid reason to engage in gardening and working with plants and working with the living things around us, is because it connects us to the part of us that's greater than us. And otherwise it would all look the same. You know, when you go to Starbucks, you're really never sure if you're in Beijing or in Burns, and that's because they're all the same. And plants are going to let you escape that sort of generic look that you could be anywhere, because these are the same things that people are growing in the southeastern US as they are in the Pacific Northwest. So we can really embrace the sense of where we are on the planet, which is a beautiful place. Okay, so we're all convinced that natives are a great thing to include in our gardens, but maybe we have one first question to ask is, what's a native? And that's really a kind of a squishy question. And it depends on what your frame of reference is. Because a native takes into account the plants or the species that occur naturally in a particular place and time. So you've got two elements there. You've got a spatial element and a temporal or a time-based element. And so I can talk about natives, plants that are native to North America, Or I could talk about plants that are native to the Pacific Northwest, or to the Willamette Valley, or to Soap Creek, where I live. So you have to define your scope, basically, to say what is a native, because plants, those native species, ones that occur naturally in a region, have evolved to live in these places wherever they're naturally occurring, without being artificially dispersed. And so that also can take into account a time kind of factor, because one way that we say, well, when I talk about natives and in referring to the Flora of Oregon and our concepts of natives, we refer to plants, vascular plants that occur within the state of Oregon, that have been here since European settlers. So I'm putting on that an artificial or a time frame that that could easily be said, well, I'm going to consider natives that have been in this region since the glaciations. So by choosing a time and a place, we're able to sort of put the boundaries on what we're talking about. So in this sense, my definition of a native needs some explanation to you, so we can make sure that we're talking about the same things. And so that's why I say rigidity is optional. You know, you don't have to be really adamant that every plant you use be native, or that it's native to your valley or your province. Those can be really wonderful goals, and require a level of diligence that is certainly something that one can strive for. But however you choose to sort of flex with the definition of what a native is, and your perspective and circumscription of a native will let you really use that and achieve what you're trying, which I think from what we just talked about earlier is using plants that are well adapted to the environment that you're in and that give you a sense of place. So a good place to learn about this stuff, you know, well, how do I know what's native around here? A flora is a great tool to tell you that kind of information. And so a flora is a tool that documents the plant life, again, through space and time. So the OregonFlora, as all floras are a very sort of old way of communicating botanical information. Long before Google, for hundreds of years, people have created floras which give, again, a circumscription of a place. And for the OregonFlora project, or OregonFlora, we're talking about the geopolitical boundary of the state of Oregon. And we're also talking about vascular plants of those. And so vascular plants, you'll remember, are things that have the vascular tissue. So it includes everything from ferns, conifer trees, herbs, shrubs, grasses, basically everything growing out there except for mosses, lichens, liverworts, fungi. So vascular plants are what our program is looking at. And this is a place, so a flora is a body of information that can tell you what plants occur in an area and where they occur and what they look like and how to identify them. So in Oregon, we have about 4,700 different taxa. And by taxa, I mean species or subspecies or variety. However finely you can define a plant and have it be one entity that's distinguished from others. So 4,601, that's 4,700, that's a lot. And so it takes a lot of work to compile all of this information. And so this is what we've been doing for all these years. This work is coming out as a 3-volume set. We've published volume 1 in 2016. Volume 2 is about to go to press really this summer. Volume 3 will be coming out in a couple of years. So I don't know how many of you have ever worked with or seen a flora, but they typically occur in a print format, and they contain, as I said, descriptions of each plant species. And in those, you can see here's an example of some pages from the Flora of Oregon, Volume 1. And this is talking, this section, these pages we're on, are covering the gymnosperms or the conifers. And so for every section that you have, you know, plants are hierarchically arranged. So you have a plant family, and then within that family, there are genera, many, more than one genus of plants, each of which have characteristics that tie them together. And then within each genus, there are species, and sometimes there are even subspecies within a species. So within that hierarchy, every single end unit has a detailed description. You can see here at the bottom, here's one for one particular taxon. And you'll also see there's a little thumbnail map that shows where in the state it occurs. And all of these numbered lines here are parts of an identification tool where one chooses between the two pairs, one of the pair of options that then, when you match up your unknown plant specimen to those that best fit, will guide you to precise identification. So it's an incredibly powerful and precise tool that will help you get there. And it's, in some cases, as in the Flora of Oregon, is assisted with beautiful pen and ink illustrations. So all of these pieces together, so we've got a way to identify it, we've got descriptions that includes habitats, where a plant might be found, how long the leaves are, what color its flowers are, what the fruits look like, where it occurs in the area that we're talking about, which for us is the state of Oregon, and then visual information. So really, this is what's going to be the go-to source for botanical information of flora. And it's really important too, because so much depends on knowing accurately what plants occur in an area. And this really plays out in land management areas. And so you need this information, and it also helps to have a context to hang all of these facts and these details on. And so for OregonFlora, in the front of each volume, we include chapters that sort of give context. Volume 1, we included chapters on the ecology of the state and the ecoregions, because that's a lens through which we view so much in the work that we do. And I'll be talking a little bit more about that. Volume 2, like I said, is going to be coming out later this fall. And its front chapters are one about plant-insect interactions, as these pages are from, as well as a chapter on gardening with native species. So that's something you might want to look forward to. So using then the information that OregonFlora has gathered to create this comprehensive work of botanical information, we can see that as the go-to place for some information about how we can then take these plants that grow in the wild and best understand them so that we can apply them to the situations that we want, which is in our gardens and landscapes. So what I'm going to do now is talk a little bit about some of the things that might be helpful for you in thinking about how to use natives if you haven't yet been gardening or landscaping with natives, or how you might consider and augment the information that you have and around natives to hopefully watch your native plants in your gardens thrive. So it's not unique to gardening with natives by any means, but it often helps to start with a plan or a goal. What is it that you want to achieve? And is it because it's cool and the latest hipster thing, or is it because natives are going to speak to your soul? Or is it because you've had these great seeds that your friend keeps sharing with you when she goes on walks and hikes and stuff? So whatever your goals are, and you can have multiple goals clearly with any sort of gardening or planting project. You can, when you have a sense of what those are, it can help you better achieve them or keep them in mind as you work through things. So again, it can be anything from being, set it up and let it take care of itself, to finding the right plant that's going to be tough and hardy and come back year after year when your pets and your kids are running all over it, or just knowing that you're supporting pollinators and helping native songbirds, or just the joy of trying new things and gathering seeds perhaps and seeing what happens to them. So I'll give you a frame that you can, a jumping off place. So one major difference, I think, between gardening with traditional horticultural varieties and native plants is that the site drives the plant choice. So a lot of horticultural varieties, they've been bred to grow in uniform conditions. And so you'll often say, well, I'm going to, go buy this plant and I'm going to go find a place to stick it in the ground. So as opposed to, I have this great place. I'm going to find a plant that fits there.
Hey, Linda.
Yeah.
So your audio, sorry to interrupt you. Your audio is cutting in a little in and out a little bit. Would you mind maybe try turning off your video and let's see if that helps?
Sure.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Yeah. So so this kind of turns some gardening on its head, because what the real priority is and the driver of gardening with natives and working with natives is the conditions and the ecosystem that exists that you have or that you're going to try and create. And from the knowledge of that and looking at what plants naturally occur in such a habitat or an ecoregion, that then guides your choice to what plants, species would thrive in those areas. So as I mentioned, ecoregions are sort of the lens through which to view and ask these questions. In Oregon, we've defined 11 ecoregions, and an ecoregion is the combination of biological and abiotic factors that together are the places for plant communities, unique plant communities. So looking at ecoregions then can give you some ideas about what kinds of soils might be found in a place. what plants occur together, what plant communities might you find, how densely do those plants sort of occur in nature? Are they cheek to jowl, or are they sparsely spread across a wide open space? And what kind of microhabitats do they occupy? This can be something as small as like ruts in a meadow or a pasture, or it could be like rocky knobs on a hillside. And as you look at both of those situations and look at that larger picture of what kind of light, what aspect are those plants occurring in, what are they co-occurring with, and what microhabitat do they live in, that can inform you and guide you to how you can then go back and look at your landscape, your yard, your land, and see what might fit and what is it most like and what is it emulating in nature. And so it's always great to, within an area, to find a reference ecosystem that you can go back to and look at and see how the plants are, how many different species are there, and sort of let that guide you on how you can meld and mold your land to follow those principles that were originally there. So in addition to thinking about ecoregions and having a plan for what you want to try and achieve with a native garden, the soils are really important. And I think as we learn more and more about how critical and, pun intended, how foundational it is to be aware of and consider the soils that are in an area. And a lot of places have been completely modified from what their native condition was. Think about a yard or an urban area. And so you're going to be facing not only perhaps soil compaction or contamination with chemicals, but even complete removal of the basic native endogenous soils. And that can also change not only the organic and the inorganic matter there, but it can change the water and the hydrology of the area. So all of these are things that are impacting what you're going to try and do or what you are doing, and to try and go back to that reference site that you have or have visited and consider the soil, feel it. What does it look like? What does it feel like? How does the water drain in it? And how might you work to create your planted areas similar to that? Another huge part of soil is the living components of it, not just the minerals and elements or even the organic matter, but the biological communities. We're finding more and more how important and how truly amazing the fungi that create mycorrhizal associations are to plants and how they benefit plants. About 90% of all plants on Earth have a symbiotic relationship with mycorrhizal fungi. And so these can then obviously help maintain a healthy plant and improve the water retention, the soil porosity, the ability of the plant to get nutrients and water when these naturally occurring fungi and bacteria are present. And so if you're dealing with, something that's been a lawn for, 35 years or was, fill from a construction site, well, how can you get some of that back? There are commercial inoculants that can be applied when planting to help restore and build up that biological community. And there are enough fungi that are sort of generic and broadly dispersed that you can buy one of these, and you're bound to get some species that are going to be helpful and matched to your particular plants. You can also be extremely customized and develop something, either working with a local source if there are sources for these, or even using soil or duff or compost from a natural area that is serving like as your model or in a similar type of place that can help restore and promote that fungal and biological soil community. Okay, so then knowing then you're thinking about what it is that you want with your landscape, and you've thought about how it fits in the larger scheme in that ecoregional sense. Once again, we go back to that choosing your plants for your place. So you've assessed your site, and you've looked either virtually through books or other information, or actually gone physically to places to see, oh, this is a place that I can emulate in my planted area. And so you've got a reference site. And now, what do you have on your lot that that is going to be a part of it? And there probably wasn't a 4-story building out in nature, but you can't remove that building or that fence post or that rock wall or your neighbor's garage. And you might not want to remove that lovely bushy shrub that makes shade. So what features, whether it's a path, a structure like a building, or a large plant that exists on the site, do you want to keep? And how then can you use that as part of your landscape? And this is just like hardscaping. It can be pieces that you purposefully put there to look aesthetically appealing, or it can be something you just have to deal with because you can't get rid of the septic tank, or you can't get rid of the propane tank. And one way to think of these as opportunities as opposed to obstacles is, how might something analogous to that be occurring in nature? Would this large apartment building that I live next to, would that be like a south-facing like cliff face that might support, because of all the reflected heat, might support some plants that wouldn't normally occur right in this area, but it's a micro habitat that I can foster? So those are some of the questions that you can ask and consider as you look at your land, and aim for an ecologically functional planting. I think that really is an underlying goal when gardening with native species, to be able to make it function like a piece of nature. So that kind of stuff needs some resources, right? And OregonFlora is to help you with those resources. Not only do we prepare a book, but we also have a website. And this is our current website, OregonFlora.org. And I'll go real quickly through this because I really want to show you what we're working on right now. We have a number of tools, a mapping program, a wonderful photo gallery, and what's probably of interest to y'all is that we have a gardening page on our current website that lists a number of different plant species and some of the nurseries that in past years have have sold these plants. So this is a list of names of different species that are commercially available that can give you some great ideas depending upon where you are as to where you might find some materials that will suit your particular location. So let's go back now. I want to.
Yeah, I think it's in there.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's see.
Okay. Did I get it back?
No, it looks like you're not sharing.
Oh, okay.
Right now.
Here we
so
go.
Just go through that process and reshare.
Okay. See it now?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So if you go to our website right now, you will find Oregon Flora with tons of information, and it's only going to get better because we are moving, and we've been working for a number of years on redesigning our website to use a Symbiota Platform, which is software that's based and designed for sharing biological information. And so this is going to be coming this summer. We've got a lot going on at Oregon Flora. The main thing that we're striving for here is creating interactive and visual connections to the plant data that we have and can share. And so again, this will include a spatial-based mapping module. So what it means is that instead of just putting in a plant name like you currently can, which is really informative, you can draw a little shape or select a circle or something and get all the plants so you can learn the diversity that occurs in an area. Just like you can also just say, show me every place, everywhere Acer circinatum occurs, and where might it co-occur with licorice ferns, because that's what I want to put in my garden. So another really useful tool. We also have ways to identify plants, whether you start at a map and you drop a pin where you are. When you do that, we have what we call an interactive mapping tool that will return all of the records, all of the plant species that we know of within that area, and then give you choices that you recognize on your unknown plant that will let you identify it. This can be either from, like I said, a place on a map or a pre-selected area that we've studied in greater detail. But one thing that we've put a lot of effort in is the native portal. And I'm going to, again, share that with you. Okay, so this is something that we are really excited about, and I think will be a really useful tool for people who are interested in gardening with natives. We currently have about 200 species that are featured here, and you can see that we have their name and a picture. So for each of these, there's a fact page. And so understand that I'm flying without a safety net here because this is our development site. So you're going to see all the warts, and hopefully everything will still work. But I did want to share with y'all, this is what we're working for. For each of these plants over here, we're going to get rid of those warts, and you'll be able to see and keep track of all of the details that we have. We have 17 different characters that we track. There's also beautiful photos, a description of how this might be used in a garden. And then I think just to show you some of the depth that exists throughout the OregonFlora website, for every photo and every observation on a map, there are details about it. So you can see not only a full-sized photo of a plant, but you can also get all the details. So you'll see here, this is everything we know about this particular photograph, when it was taken, where it was taken. We can show you where it occurred in the state. If it's part of some other list, we can share that with you. So this is an incredible amount of information. And be aware that we have this kind of data for all of the 50,000 field photos that we have. We also have this for the hundreds of thousands of plant observations that we have that can be used on the map. So it's an enormous amount of information that we have and can share with users. So not only can you just browse and look at pretty pictures and say, gosh, I'd like to know more about Pacific dogwood, but we want to help gardeners think about, remember those reference ecosystems or communities. And so we've chosen a couple of basic groups that can give you some plant combinations that would be useful and can guide you for some plantings. So in this view, you also get a description about how rock gardens might function and some of the characteristics of them. And then you can see in this view, sort of all together, what might I pick if I'm looking for some pink or some orange? You see them and imagine them, how you could lay these out in your garden. Another thing you can do is you can also search on, so I just filtered, whoops, let me go back. I can filter on a group and my results have changed. And then we have all of these characters over here that one can to narrow down your choices. So we're looking in rock garden species. I'm interested in something that perhaps supports pollinators. So I click that and then my list adjust. Or maybe, so we've got all of these different characters. Maybe I want something that also is drought tolerant. And so you see, again, the list narrows and expands, but maybe that's not exactly what I wanted after all, so we can just unclick it. So no problem there. So you can see that this is a really powerful tool. We've got a lot of information that can be used, and this is all building upon information that comes from a flora and the work in creating a flora. Let's go back now. Okay, so hopefully what I've shown you is that native plants that can be used in gardens and in landscapes offer us a real chance to connect with where we are on the planet and sort of see it from their perspective, you know, see it from the plant's perspective. We have to assess the site that we have, and if we want to try and match it with the plants that are most adapted and that have evolved to those types of settings. And by doing that, we can tap the resources that a flora or a floristic project provides, because that is the objective of floras is to capture all of the botanical knowledge for an area. And it's a wonderful way, by gardening and growing these plants and connecting ourselves with plants, to fully appreciate what our plant diversity around us provides. So this is what OregonFlora does, and I hope that this has been helpful for you in learning a bit about native species in Oregon and how they might be a part of your planted landscape. So thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Linda. So while folks are thinking of their questions, if you have a specific question for Linda and the project, if you could please use the Q&A box so we can track those a little better than the chat box, but I have to say, I don't know if you can see the chat box, Linda, but people are just wowed by this website.
Oh, good.
I was like, you can sort and you can see what your garden will look like. Like that was like, ooh, I can't wait. So I think you are going to have some big fans of this new website.
Great.
Especially about being able to sort, you know, folks are interested in pollinators as well. So I think that's just fantastic. So I did put the donation link in there. No, you know, no expectations, but if you love this type of work, we'll, you know, definitely try to support it. Folks were asking about a recording and the resources. So we will be sharing all of that out. So everybody that registered, and I know we filled up, we had actually more people register than could get in. So we'll send out all this information to folks with a link to the recording within a few days, as long as it takes to process on my home internet here. So yeah, you can just kind of see all these accolades rolling in, Linda. So I don't know, do you want to try your video again, and maybe we can look through the Q&A and we'll see if it cuts in and out.
Okay.
So, and I know there's 34 questions. We're not going to be able to answer them all. So I'll pick a couple and we'll see how we do. But they are linked to your email, folks, so we can also follow up with you on this. And I actually got a couple of questions about the data that this system uses. So OSU has a couple of big projects like the Oregon Bee Atlas, where you have folks that are going out and they're tracking bees and plants. There's iNaturalist, where people are pulling in data. There's the herbaria data. Could you just speak to a little bit about how, you know, behind the scenes, how all this data gets organized and compared?
Absolutely. And it is a lot of data. We started with the Oregon State University Herbarium. And as you may know, a herbarium is a collection of pressed, dried plant specimens that document where a plant has occurred in time. And so that was the base when we started databasing those, because that being the de facto Oregon herbarium, the state's herbarium, it has representation of virtually every plant that occurs in the state. And so that was the foundation, because it's a specimen, you can go and touch it and look at it. But for years, we have been working, especially with the Native Plant Society of Oregon, to encourage people to report to us their observations of plants. And so individuals, anybody, whether you're an individual, whether you're part of an Audubon hiking trip or an NPSO hiking trip or a researcher, you can submit species lists of plants you observe at a place, and we can integrate those into our tools. So we have, I think we're around 400,000 of those observation records that people have contributed as citizen scientists, as researchers, as professionals. We also have people contribute photographs, field photographs, and there are so many great options for linking to things like you were describing with the other OSU projects. And one important thing to note about our data is that we, to the greatest extent possible, curate all of the information. So this isn't Google. You don't just throw it up and say, I saw, you know, an agave cactus at the coast. You know, we curate this information, so you know when you go to OregonFlora, you're getting things that have been verified and curated.
Denise had a question about volunteer opportunities. How do you use volunteers in the OregonFlora?
With all the different things that we have going on, we have a number of different opportunities for people. It could be anything from recording information, transcribing information, helping with fundraising events or outreach events. We are working also in promoting native species in agricultural lands, improving native habitats in working ag lands. And so we're creating some opportunities for doing some site maintenance, helping pull weeds, helping seed, helping gather seed, doing surveys. So it ranges from all different levels, from contributing species lists, helping in a few instances out in the field, working with data, lots of ways to become part of the OregonFlora team.
So they just go on the website and they can find some way to contact you guys.
There's an email address on the information about us, yes.
Great. A couple of questions about the information that will be in the new website. Does it include any information on the propagation or maintenance of these plants, or would that be somewhere where they just are identifying, you know, which plants they want, and then they go to another source to figure out how to grow them?
We have some limited information about how to propagate and to grow plants and maintain them, and those will be in the profile pages. I was showing you the profile page, and so we're striving to have, for every one of those downloadable profile pages, there will be a little bit of information. And there's also one of the options that we do gather is how plants can be, how they reproduce, whether it's by runners or bulbs or seed. That's another way that we share information on that.
Peeking through the questions, sorry, there's a lot. So a couple folks have specific questions about growing natives, like that are particular to their yards. And so what I'm going to do for you folks is we're going to answer those particular questions offline, if that's all right, just because there's a bunch. So let's see. So some of the photos, so Peter had a question about how current are the plant photos and the location IDs. I know you're pulling in all this data and historic data. And it's kind of related to maybe our climate is changing. And so if the pictures were, you know, taken a long time ago, how does that match up with our changing climate?
Mm-hmm. A flora, and both our books and our digital flora, especially our digital resources, I think it's really important to recognize that they represent a line of history. And so what we're doing is capturing, and what the herbarium does also is we're capturing instances of which plants occur where, when. So it's really important that we have documentation of plant species and plant communities different times. And so I never think of our data as being out of date. I think of it rather as this rich treasure trove of information. And there are filtering tools that exist both on our current mapping program, and it will exist on our new program, that you can put a window or a span of time if you want to see historic plant occurrences or newer plant occurrences. And like I showed you on those little tabs, we have all of those data for every data point that we keep to the best of our ability.
Well, that'll be fun. Like you said, so much data. I love it. Yeah. I'm a data nerd. So I'm like, oh, this will be really fun to play around with this. So your current website does have some connections with nurseries and who has availability. So Nina had a question. Are you going to maintain some of those same lists, or how does that work? Like I said, you know, we know they're there. We want them. How do we get them?
Okay, so that is the list of nurseries. It comes with a big caveat, because we received funding from the Oregon Department of Ag to develop that aspect of our website several years ago. And you walk into any store, especially these days, and you know inventory comes and goes, especially in something as much as living plants. So that is a step we're going to launch our website, still needing to develop, and it is a high priority and a desire, because it's so exciting, to develop a funding model and a way to allow nurseries and plant growers to maintain their lists of inventories as a way to share that information. And that could be pulled into those search tools as well. So that's one of our projects that we're looking for funding for. So any help out there, please talk to me.
And we have a lot of listeners that are joining us from outside of Oregon, and they're curious. So Oregon has this big body of work. Do other states have something similar? So like maybe our East Coast or Midwest or Washington states?
Yeah. The SimBiota website portal is part of a big network, a national and actually international network. And that was one of the exciting things about getting on board with them, is because now there are regional portals. There's a Midwest portal, there is a Southeastern, there's a Southwestern, there's a Northeastern, and we're sort of becoming the Pacific Northwest SimBiota portal. And what this does is it allows us to pull their data and share data really easily. So these portals that SimBiota have some of the same tools. The gardening tool that I shared with you, the Grow Natives, is new. That's innovative work that we've introduced to SimBiota, so others won't have that. I can just quickly say there's also in the Pacific Northwest, in Washington, up at University of Washington, the Pacific Northwest Herbaria consortium that deals with herbarium specimens from different areas. New England also has a very involved floristic project, and one example in particular is the state of Virginia is doing similar things.
Great. So we are almost at the end of our time. I'll just throw out one growing plant question. Do you know anything about the average lifespan of a flowering currant? The people want to know. If not, Barbara and Kathleen and Linda, we will research this offline and get back to you. But maybe you're an expert in flowering currant.
I don't know. They're very lovely plants, but I don't know how long they typically live.
Okay, but we'll figure that out. We'll ask around and get that for you. So I do want to thank everybody for joining us today. There are a bunch of questions we'll go through and match up. Some of them are repeated questions, and I'm going to send out all of the links that Linda mentioned. So links to the Flora books and to her current website. And so hopefully that will answer your questions. And I just want to thank you again, Linda, for sharing this project. It's really exciting. I think you're going to have a huge audience when this new website opens up.
Great. Okay. Thanks so very much.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.